Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coast to Coast on the Her Hoop Stats Podcast Network. I'm Crina Mustafa alongside Calvin Wetzel, and we are into week 2 of the WNBA regular season. We're going to get into a ton of things today. We'll check in on some of the new coaches and how their teams have been doing in the league. We'll get to our favorite teams of the week, how they've been doing, and then some questions surrounding some other teams. And then lastly, like I promised last week, we're starting this new segment within our games to watch, which will be the team to watch for the week based on what they did the previous week. So make sure you stick around to find out which team we'll be highlighting at the end. But Cal, are you ready?
I was born ready. You know me. Let's go.
I love that. Let's go. We love the energy. All right, let's get into our headline of the week. We're checking in on some of our new head coaches and their teams. We got a couple of first-year coaches. We'll start with the Phoenix Mercury, who have Nate Tibbetts as their head coach. I almost forgot his name for a second because I almost said girl dad. But they they have been pretty solid to start the season. They had a big win over the Las Vegas Aces. They also beat the Mystics. They did lose to Dallas, although it's still early. Dallas is not a bad team at all. There's certain things that happen within that game itself in terms of matchups and BG still being out. But overall, I would say the Mercury have been performing. And I think compared to the last couple of years, I think it's a really big positive for them. And obviously, there were some trepidations with Nate Tibbetts coming in, like I just previously mentioned, the whole girl dad fiasco and not previously having women's basketball experience. And I think just kind of the phrasing of I don't really know what's going on in women's basketball. I think that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But kind of moving past that, what have you seen with the Mercury that you've loved in these first 2 weeks?
Yeah, the thing with the hire was that obviously there were a lot of those elements around the hire that were sort of like raising some eyebrows, but it was never really about like he's going to be bad as a coach. Like maybe we
Yeah.
just didn't know, and it turned out that he's actually pretty good. I think as a coach. And by the way, I know him as Girl Dad too. That's the only name that I think is appropriate that social media knows him as now. So we can just stick
Yeah.
with that. But I love the Girl Dad offense. It's threes, 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 just launching. Ka is taking more threes. As a whole, the team is taking 40% of their shots from three, which no one has ever done in league history if they keep that pace up for the entire season. It's just a modern philosophy. And I feel like when I watch them, like they are getting open threes, but they're also shooting when they're only like sort of semi-open, but it's a catch and shoot, and that's a good shot. Like that's the philosophy. If you can get a catch and shoot three that's not completely someone with a hand in your face, that's a good shot, especially right now without BG. Obviously, we'll see how that offense looks when she comes back and you get a big post presence, which could change things. But going a little bit smaller, that's been really the key to the start of their season. And they're also going to be without Beck Allen now in the next game Tuesday night, the night that we record. So I think he's going to be put to the test even more because she's been playing the four basically in this
Yeah.
smaller lineup. So front court's going to get tested even more, and he's going to have to be even more creative because it's really not a deep team at all. Shug Sutton is doubtful for that game, so just another hit to the depth. But in terms of what they've done so far, like I love the spacing. And when Beck Allen has been healthy, like her in the corner, I think we saw Nikias had some good breakdowns of this, like pulling Asia out when they played the Aces, which is just a key because when Asia is around the paint, like you're just not going to score. She's the best defender in the world. But when Beck Allen can kind of pull her away, like that was a really big key for the Mercury to get some of their offense going. So I love what they've done, and obviously the players really like him. I saw like Natasha Cloud's press conference the other day talking about how much she loves playing in this offense, and it's been really fun to watch.
Yeah. And you talk about, Beck Allen being out in concussion protocol as well as BG, obviously. It's it's gonna hurt against their next matchup because they do play the Connecticut Sun at 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. If you are listening to this on Tuesday. And obviously we know we talked about the Sun a little bit. We're gonna talk about them more later this episode. The Sun have got size, and that is definitely going to hurt the Mercury. But I think all things considered, they also play against the New York Liberty later this week on Wednesday. I think we're going to talk about that too later on. But a couple of matchups that I think are really going to test the Mercury as they continue to kind of develop within this girl dad offense, like you called it. But I do want to talk a little bit about Kalia Copper because she smashed her career high. She's had 2 35 plus point games already. And obviously, we know she is a really good player. Former finals MVP. We know what she can do. She's probably one of the most fun finishers in the WNBA or like just like in basketball that I have ever witnessed in my entire life. I think I compared her to like Spider-Man almost the way that she finishes when I was doing some like Marvel comparisons. It's just the way that she just like moves her body and is able to just kind of like move around defenses and just like her speed overall too. She's obviously a very exciting player and she did great things in Chicago, won a championship. But what is it about this Mercury offense that kind of has her going crazy in these like first weeks of the season? Like I kind of called it like unlocking COD. Like that's what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, she's sort of put herself into the MVP conversation. Maybe not like the front runner necessarily, but kind of in that tier early on. She's dropping 30 left and right. And to me, I think unlocking her has been all about when when you look at basketball coaches at any level, I think the biggest thing that you can say positive about a basketball coach is that they take the personnel that they have and the skill sets that they have and put them in positions to succeed based on that. And so when you look at Ka's skill set, obviously she can shoot and she's part of this barrage of threes that we've been seeing from the Mercury, but she also, like you said, elite finisher, elite at getting downhill, and he's bringing her off of curls and staggers and all these different things to kind of get her going downhill. And I think Owen Pence put this clip out, so you should go look up Owen Pence on Twitter when they beat the Aces, the second Aces game, and it was towards the end. The game was still kind of in doubt, and Ka basically had like the dagger, the put away shot with a minute left or whatever it was, and it was getting her downhill. And Jackie Young played great defense on it, but it was just all about Ka using her speed and her quickness and her size and her finishing ability, getting downhill to her right hand, putting that ball off glass, and basically putting the nail in the coffin in that game. And that's the kind of thing that Girl Dad has been putting her in a position to take advantage of. So it's been really fun to see. And we'll see like how it looks when BG comes back. But right now, this offense is all centered around COD. I love it.
We're so unserious. I actually can't. But yeah, no, I think those are all really good points. I think, obviously we knew talking about the Mercury in the offseason with all the moves and transactions that they made, that they were going to be one of the more interesting teams heading into the season. So it's nice to see that kind of, like happening within the first couple of weeks now that we have kind of like a small sample size and is going to just continue to develop even more. But if we look at the other team that has a first year head coach, the Chicago Sky, they had a very solid win against the New York Liberty. They lost a very, very close game against Connecticut Sun. Both really impressive performances this week. And I kind of put it as like preseason panic is kind of what happened before the season started for the Chicago Sky. Rankings had them really low. They've been talking about that a lot. James Wade leaving the team, like it just feels like there's just been like a kerfuffle of just like movement around this team. And obviously they don't have Izzy Harrison or Camila Cardoso yet. They both aren't healthy. Camila Cardoso should be returning on June 1st. As we know, if you don't know that by now, then you've been missing out on a bunch of the drama on Twitter around that as well. But when you look at Teresa Witherspoon, how has she been a much needed presence for this team? And honestly, a big reason why they've been able to be super competitive early on.
She's infused some amazing, immaculate vibes into this whole franchise in the city, and I had to wear the shirt to represent it today. I think like when James Wade left,
I'm wearing a Raptors shirt, so I guess I'm kind of representing James Wade. But it's all relative the way you want to look at it
in a weird way.
Yeah.
I love it. When he left, the thing is like they didn't have very many picks going forward because he had traded some of those. Obviously, a lot of the players from the championship team were gone at that point. Ka was still there, but most of them had moved on. So it just felt like there wasn't a lot of reason for optimism around the team. And now, like, no, the team's not a championship contender at this moment, but there's so much optimism in terms of the direction that they're going. They got some of those picks back, brought in Angel, who has been great, and of course, like you said, who we're about to see. They brought in. I really love that they brought Diamond DeShields back and Kennedy Carter, who very different paths for both of them, but both lottery picks who are still pretty young, who still have the potential to make some serious noise in this league. And probably the early part of their career didn't go how a lot of people maybe thought or how they wanted it to, but they still have every chance to sort of prove people wrong. And I love that the Sky kind of bought low and gave them that next chance. And then one thing that I love that Teresa Weatherspoon is doing in particular, and if you can pull the clips up of this, is
Mhm.
that she is having them just beat people down the floor. All these runouts and leaking out off of misses. It's well, and turnovers, everything. But it's oftentimes if you watch the player guarding the shooter right there when they miss. So it's diamond on this one if you're on YouTube. It's not always, but it's oftentimes the player guarding the shooter just leaks out and beats someone down the floor. And you can tell that they're very clearly coached to do this and coached to look for that pass that Diamond just made on that, to have their eyes up. And as soon as they see someone beating someone down the floor, and like this one, I don't know how Stewie got beat down the floor there, but that's what the Sky are doing. They're just beating everyone and they're scoring. The funny thing is, like, they're not even really taking very many threes. It's sort of the opposite in that regard of the girl dad offense, but the offense is having so much success still because of these types of runouts and because their ability to score in transition and just get to the rim, and bringing a player like Kennedy Carter off the bench who can go get a bucket anytime she wants. They've been killing people. And the similarity between these two, even though obviously the 3-point thing is totally different, when you're guarding either of these teams, you have to be on your toes and alert at all times. With the Mercury, all of these threes, like if they catch you napping for half a second on a closeout or a switch, they see a sliver of space, they're going to launch a three. In the Sky, if they catch you napping, like we just saw on some of that transition defense, they're going to beat you down the floor. They're going to get an easy bucket. So these aren't teams that you can take a play off against. They're teams that you have to show up for every single second of 40 minutes against them. And that's what I love about what both of these coaches have done. And they're both really fun to watch in their own very different way.
Yeah, and even talking about some of the specific players that you mentioned, Kennedy Carter, who fouled out in the second half in that very close game against the Suns. So who knows, if she hadn't fouled out, maybe this guy could have, had a little bit more help to pull that off. But I want to talk specifically about, Teresa's Teaspoon's leadership with Angel Reese. I think with everything that's kind of been thrown at Angel over the last few years, including this season, I feel like specifically this season already, there's just been a couple of incidents where she's had to maintain such a very wise presence in the media. I feel like every single one of her answers to whatever reporters have been asking, or just any situation that kind of gets thrown her way, it's been handled very well. She knows exactly what to say. It comes off very wise, even as a rookie. And even Teaspoon has been super positive and close with her. And I know I've seen pictures of them together, courtside, just whenever they're in pressers as well too. She's got her back. I just wanted to ask, how is Teaspoon's leadership going to help Angel kind of become who she's meant to be in basketball? Because we know this is only the beginning for her.
I think the representation matters a lot. This is what we always talk about. Representation matters, but specifically, like having someone who has that experience as a player in this league, as a really high level player in this league, who's been there, who's dealt with the media. Maybe the media is different today than when Teaspoon played, but she's still kind of dealt with all of these things that you are asked of as a player in this league. And for Angel to have that voice, I think is critical. So I love to see Teaspoon sort of, and it's other players as well, obviously, but just mentoring all these young players that the Sky have, and being even aside from all of the stuff that they've been doing on the court, just I think being a really good presence in this franchise in the locker room.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear that the Chicago Sky veterans have the backs of their rookies, whether that's just speaking on social media or just anything that you've been seeing in pressers on the court, off the court. I think that's so important to team success and to know that you really have each other's backs. And so, yeah, that's definitely part of the success for the Chicago Sky. And it's been really cool to see these first year coaches doing their thing with both Chicago and Phoenix. I think both are teams that kind of want to get back into the mix of things, who, were both in the finals several years ago now. I don't even know what the word would be. Few years ago, several years ago. The years are starting to add up, which is kind of terrifying. But they're trying to get back at that level again. And these are the steps that you're going to need to take. These are the changes that kind of have to happen when things get thrown your way. So it's been super cool to see kind of the positive, takeaways from both of those coaches and the teams itself. But let's move on to some other teams that played this week. And we'll talk about some on the rise and then some that have maybe some questions around them. All right. So, as of now, as of when we're recording, the Connecticut Sun remain the only undefeated team in the WNBA. If you think to this time last year, that was the Las Vegas Aces, who obviously, like we mentioned, already lost a game to the Phoenix Mercury earlier this week. But if you look at the Sun, looking at this week alone, they beat the Fever, the Minnesota Lynx, and the Chicago Sky. Obviously, that game against the Sky, AT was ejected for that hard foul on Angel Reese, which I was kind of alluding to, and some of the things that have kind of gotten thrown at Angel Reese, during her 2 weeks as a professional in the league. But even without AT in the game, the Sun were able to pull that out. What have you liked from them, and what kind of makes them a convincing competitor so far? I think they're 5-0 right now.
Okay, first off, how is DeWanna Bonner still hooping this hard at age almost 37? She's better than she was last year. Last year, she was better than she was the year before. I don't understand it.
Can we
But
give her most improved player? Does that work to a superstar? I don't even know.
why not? Let's do it. Forget Dejanay Carrington. No, Dejanay. It's Dejanay. But DeWanna Bonner, I like that idea, actually. That would be an amazing story for an upper 30 something to win most improved player. Maybe we should
I don't know how
start
much she
that
would like
campaign.
that.
Yeah.
I feel like not you calling
I think
me
I
a
think she
wide
would be the
hater.
first one to tell you that it should be Dejanay if you asked her.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea though on your part. Speaking of Dejanay though, the other thing about this team and why they've been able to basically not skip a beat is because the biggest question marks around this team, like in the offseason where they lost their entire starting backcourt over the offseason, Ty Harris and especially Dejanay Carrington have stepped into that role beautifully and picked up a ton of slack for this team on both ends, especially in Dejanay's case, which has been huge. So the thing is, when you look at on paper, this team actually has been really bad shooting the three right now, and there's no way that continues. They're not going to be like Aces level, Mercury level shooting the three, but their 3-point shooting percentage is only going to come up from here. So like they haven't even been getting lucky. They're undefeated right now, and if anything, maybe getting a little bit unlucky. And that's the scary thing, I think, for the rest of the league when the threes start dropping. Like DeWanna's averaging 20, shooting like under 20% from three somehow. And the threes are going to start dropping for her, going to start dropping for Dejanay. And when that happens, like, look out, this team can beat anybody on defense. Obviously, where they hang their hat and have for a while, like their help rotations are just so good. They force so many turnovers because it's so tough to make reads against this team, the way they fly around. So I love what I've seen from this team. And obviously, a couple really close calls and maybe could have dropped one by now, but they haven't. They're the only undefeated team and they're at the top of the standings.
Yeah, a couple of really close ones, including that game against the Sky and against the Minnesota Lynx as well. You talk about Ty Harris and Dejanay Carrington. Ty Harris, I think, is having like her most efficient start to the season that she's had in like her career. Like she's been so impressive to watch and has helped out the Connecticut Sun just so much. Like when you're able to have, and like we go back to those puzzle pieces, right? When you're able to have everybody that kind of slots into their role, like not everybody has to be the superstar. Like you have these role players for a reason. You have your core players that you can count on in the regular rotation. And the fact that she's been stepping up and backing this team up, I think is helping them so far. Another team that I just mentioned, Minnesota Lynx, have also been really freaking fun to watch this season so far. They're super competitive. I would say they're probably one of the most dangerous teams right now. They had that close loss against the Sun. They had a huge win over the New York Liberty, which I think was one of the first blowouts of the season so far. They had a big win over the Dream as well, which I think counts as the second blowout of the season so far. So they both have seemed to come from the Minnesota Lynx, if I remember correctly. What is the ceiling for this team? Like, can we call them a top 4 lock if they keep this up?
Lock feels like a strong word just because you have the Aces, the Liberty, the Sun, and the Storm, who the Lynx beat twice, obviously, to start the season, but who are already, I think, a week later playing a little bit better than they were in those first two games. And I could see maybe like the Lynx falling to fifth outside of that group, but I would use the word lock for top 5 as long as they stay healthy and are playing at this level, and a really, really good shot for top 4. The interesting thing to me about what the Lynx are doing, and I need to watch more film to sort of figure out what, like, if they've changed anything schematically or what's going on. I haven't had as much time to watch film on them as some other teams, but they're taking away the 3-point line. And that's something that Cheryl Reeve historically hasn't really done. She's, if anything, been the opposite end of the spectrum for like a decade, just given up a lot of threes. And some years it's worked. The last couple of years it hasn't. Their defense hasn't been very good, but they've completely turned it around on the defensive end this year. They're one of, if not the best defense, probably the Sun are better, maybe a top 2 defense through the first couple weeks in the league. And that's a huge deal. I was reading an article, and I wish I remember who it was by, but it was about Cheryl coming into training camp this year, basically saying we're going to start from day one working on defense. And in the past, they've started with offense and learning some of the plays and things like that, and then moved on to defense. But this year, she knew, like, we weren't very good on defense last year. We have to change that. And so from day one, they've been working on defense, and it showed, because the last couple of years they had pretty bad starts to the season. Last year, I think it was 0-6, if I remember correctly, 0-5,
Yeah.
whatever it was. Ended up coming back, making the playoffs, giving the Sun a run in the first round. This year, they don't have to worry about digging themselves out of that hole, because they've had a really strong start, and it's because they started on the defensive end. And I haven't gone back and watched film, like I said, slowing it down and really getting into the nitty gritty, but even just watching a few of their games live, you could tell very easily how connected they are, and how active they are in the defensive end, which has been huge for them, and it makes them really dangerous this year.
Absolutely, and that's without Diamond Miller as well, who's kind of been battling that knee injury. I really hope she gets healthy soon, because I feel like we still haven't really gotten like a full season from her yet, and so it would be nice if, knock on wood, these players could stay healthy. Knee stuff is like so annoying to have to deal with, but once she just kind of becomes a regular, part of this rotation as well too, I think the Minnesota Lynx can continue to unlock. I'll keep using that word because I like it. They can continue to unlock what both their defense and their offense continues to look like. And we talked about Fee last week being an MVP candidate. That's not done yet. She's continued to just be so good. I think the fact that she can just score no matter how many players are on her just makes her like a tiny bit unguardable. And so I think that's part of the problem that teams have been having, where it's like, okay, what do we do with Fee? How do we stop Fee? So it's really been cool to see what this Lynx team has kind of looked like so far. I'm really loving, like we talked about the new additions last week, like Natisha Heidemann as well has also been doing really well as kind of that facilitator in the pick and roll. So I'm really happy with what this team has done so far. Another team that was good for a really long time, then kind of fell off a little bit and is trying to now get back to that competitive and really strong presence in the WNBA standings. So really excited to see what they continue to do. Those are kind of the teams that we liked this week in the Sun and the Lynx, who are kind of on the rise. And then we had a couple of teams, more specifically the 2 teams that were in the finals last year, who lost this week, the Liberty and the Aces. We kind of talked about the games that they lost, and to be clear, no one's sounding the alarm. No one's concerned about them. We're not saying, oh my God, they lost these games early on, they have no hope. No, that's not what we're saying at all. I think it's more so, okay, they had these early losses that probably weren't like what they wanted. What do they kind of need to figure out in the short term, at least, over the next couple of weeks, to kind of get back to what, their original goals are? For both the Liberty and the Aces, you can decide which team you'd like to start with, Cal.
Well, on the Aces side, their defensive numbers aren't nearly what they were last year, and I think part of that is not fully fair, because it's still early and they've already played Phoenix twice, and the girl dad offense completely unloaded on them from 3, which is, you could say maybe they could have guarded the 3 better, but there's some of that there's just nothing you can do about. But it's also very clear that Chelsea Gray is a huge piece for this team. As if we didn't already know that. We talked about it last week, but it just lowers their margin for error, and it just brings everybody a little bit closer in this league, a little bit more parity, and a little bit more anybody can beat anybody now when you take an all-star off of the team at the top like that. On the Liberty side, everyone kind of knows the perimeter defense outside of Benaja Laney is one of their biggest holes of the team, and that's kind of what got them last year. But the defense is built on being able to make up for that with Stewie having her versatility, obviously, and then JJ as a rim protector. But the problem is when JJ gets into foul trouble, that sort of falls apart. And in their last 2 games that they lost, she had 5 fouls in both of those games. And sometimes when that starts to happen early, you can tell how the game is going to go for her, which is really what the Liberty I think need to figure out. They're 7-0 since the start of last season when JJ gets to 30 minutes in the regular season at least, including once this year. And so I think if they can keep JJ on the floor, they can cover up for anything else that's going on defense. But again, margin for error, it gets way smaller if she picks up a couple early ones, and that's what we've been seeing. So that's something that they're going to have to probably deal with throughout the season.
Yeah, and both the Aces and the Liberty don't have really easy matchups this week if you take a look at their schedule, which let's get to now. Let's go to the schedule. Let's go to our games to watch, and then also the team to watch this week. The full schedule right now, Tuesday, May 28th, you've got Mercury Sun at 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Like I mentioned, the Sparks take on the Fever at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV and League Pass. The Storm take on the Sky at 8 p.m. Eastern on League Pass. Then on Wednesday, we have that Mercury Liberty matchup at 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Cal, I see in your notes here, you wrote, it's going to be raining. Please let us go see on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, then you can see us making the rain gestures. And this is my weekly call to say that if you're not on YouTube, please join us on YouTube. But yes, what are you kind of expecting for this game since we already just kind of alluded to it right now?
Yeah, it's just the league leader in 3-point rate from last year in the Liberty against the league leader in the 3-point rate this year and the league leader ever so far, as we mentioned, in the Mercury. And I think that's just going to be a barrage from behind the 3-point line. And the Mercury haven't been particularly guarding the arc either. So there's that. And it's going to be interesting, though, aside from that, on the inside, because you mentioned earlier, the inside presence that Mercury are going to have to deal with this week when they play the Sun and the Liberty. If JJ is able to stay on the floor without Beck out, we'll see if Beck is back by that game. She's out for the Tuesday game. Without her, without BG, obviously, Natasha Mack and Liz Dixon are going to have a huge load on their hands in terms of guarding that front court of JJ and Stewie. So that's where I'm looking for maybe to decide the game, but also this game might just be decided by who makes more threes, to be honest.
Yeah, so for all you basketball sickos who just love to see it rain threes, that's the one for you to watch on Wednesday, Mercury Liberty. And then another matchup on Wednesday that these are 2 teams that we haven't really talked about too much yet, the Atlanta Dream and the Washington Mystics at 7 p.m. Eastern on League Pass. This matchup is interesting to me because these are obviously 2 teams who haven't had the best start to their seasons yet. So I think this will be a really good opportunity for the rotations to kind of get more minutes and see what kind of works against each other, because it's not like you're playing, one of the tougher or like harder competitors in the league. I think something that's like, and I want to mention this real quick before I move on, someone that's gone a little bit like under the radar, and I'm very hesitant to say that. I don't really like the whole like underrated, no one's talking about this person, but truly no one's talking about this person outside for like maybe a couple of people. That's Ariel Atkins of the Washington Mystics. She has been hooping. She's been playing so well. I know the Mystics are off to an 0-5 start, which really sucks. Maybe they get their first win against the Dream this week, but I just want to give her a little shout out because she's been a lot of fun to watch this season so far. And I know my Canadian fans are tuning into Mystics games because of Aaliyah Edwards, and she's looked a lot more comfortable as well, kind of in this second week of play. So yeah, just tune in to watch Ariel Atkins, Aaliyah Edwards, and the Mystics go up against the Dream at 7 p.m. Eastern on League Pass. And then the last game on Wednesday will be the Aces versus the Lynx at 8 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV and League Pass. And Cal, I know both you and I are very excited for this matchup. I'm excited because it's at a very reasonable time and not at like 10 p.m. Eastern. So I can stay and watch the games. But the Lynx and the Aces, this is a big test for the Lynx to see, how real their start is. 2 teams that are in that kind of elite bracket. We'll see. I'm really hoping we get a timetable on Chelsea Gray because I don't want to see any more games without her out for a longer period of time. We'll see. We really didn't even talk about the fact that the Aces waived Deasia Fair this week, which was kind of like, oh, what's going on? What are they cooking? What's up their sleeve? But yeah, so I don't know if that means, Kirsten Bell or Chelsea Gray is going to be out for a longer period of time, or what they kind of have planned. But that was an interesting thing that happened this week that totally slipped my mind until I mentioned it just now. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm glad that they waited until after they played the Fever to waive Deasia Fair so that they could have that stat with the top 4 scorers in NCAA Division I history all in the same game.
On that note, I just want to shout out Evan Gualberto, because he had that ready to go like a week before this game started. He was ready, and then everybody kind of jumped on it. So shout out to you, Evan, for being the first one to kind of come out with that stat. But yes, sorry, keep going.
It was so cool. Yeah, we love Evan. I am just excited to see how the Lynx do in this game, because when you start out really hot and exceed all expectations, the ultimate test then is when you go up against the best, like for how real the start is, and especially when we're talking about the Lynx defense being what has anchored them so far, and they're going up against the best offense. And I know the Aces are not at the top of the standings. I would still consider them the best team right now. I think until someone dethrones them, they are the best team. But even if you want to say, okay, whatever, they're second in the standings, the Sun are undefeated, like their defense hasn't been as elite as it was last year, they are still clearly the best offense and the hardest offense to guard in this league. And so this is going to be the ultimate test for that Lynx new look defense. How do they match up against the Aces in this game? And if they're going to be at home, so I'm sure it's going to be raucous. And if they can pull out a win in this one, and especially if they can pull out a win looking good on the defensive end, it's going to be hard not to be fully bought in on them this season.
Absolutely. So make sure you guys have that matchup circled on your calendar. Aces versus Lynx, Wednesday, May 29, 8 p.m. Eastern on NBA TV and League Pass. Then on Thursday, we've got 2 games, Storm versus Fever, 7 p.m. Eastern on Prime Video. We got Sparks, Sky, 8 p.m. Eastern on League Pass. Friday is WNBA on Ion Night. They've got 4 matchups. They got Aces Dream, Wings Sun, Mystics Liberty, Mercury Lynx. You can catch the full kind of schedule for that on the WNBA website. Let's get to our team of the week, Cal, before we kind of wrap up the show. Fake drum roll. Our team of the week are the... Oh, are you going to do it?
Does that come through the mic?
That was perfect. Literally
You
perfect.
can hear it?
Yes. Our team of the week are the Indiana Fever. Yay! Clap, clap, clap. Okay. Thank you for. We have everything here on Coast to Coast. We got the sound effects, we got the clips, we got everything. But I'm gonna pull up the graphic with their schedule. They get their first win of the season. Temi moves into the starting lineup over Nalissa. There's so much going on. Thoughts, reactions, all that in a second. But first, in case you didn't catch it the first time, the Fever will play the Sparks on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then on Thursday versus the Storm as well. Cal, what a week for the Indiana Fever. What are your thoughts on everything that's happened with this team?
It's just like we all predicted that the biggest story on this team would be Temi Fagbenle. That's what everyone thought coming into the season, right? But shout out to Temi for being the OG Ivy to USC transfer before it was cool, like 8 years ago, before literally every Ivy League grad transfer last year transferred to USC. That was her thing. But aside from that, she's been terrific. She has been, I think, excellent in the pick and roll. She has the most pick and roll points on the team, which is crazy. She rolls so hard. I love watching her in that aspect of her game. But on defense, she plays so hard as well. And she's been a huge boost to this front court, especially, I think, she's 31, but she has been in the league for a while. So she's sort of, I think someone on the broadcast the other day called her like fake young or something. That's not what the phrase was. I can't remember what they said, but like she plays younger than 31, whatever they said, because like she hasn't been in the league as long, but at the same time, like she has that basketball experience from overseas. And so for a really young team with players like obviously Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Alyssa Smith, I think what she's brought to this team as an experienced presence who is still sort of playing with that youthful energy or whatever you want to call it, I think has been awesome and really cool to watch. And she's having like the year of her life and only getting started. So that's the biggest story for me. But it is going to be interesting to see how everyone else develops around her because I think we've already seen Caitlin Clark improve in just a couple short weeks from her debut. We saw Leah Boston sort of the last couple games bust out of that slump a little bit, had 17 or 18 the other day. But obviously, she and Alyssa Smith in that front court still are continuing to develop, and I think by the end of the year, that's going to look a lot different too. But they're sort of getting the ball rolling. I think the Fever are compared to where they were when everyone thought the sky was falling and they were 0-5. They got a ways to go, but it's good progress from this past week that has been fun to see.
Yeah, I think getting that win kind of as early on as you can was good for them. And I know there's been a lot of questions surrounding Christy from some of the newer fans, but I think the fact that she's already like making those adjustments early on too will be good for this team because that's eventually, I mean, that's essentially what they're going to need. They're going to need to experiment with who they have to see what works and continue to, like you said, grow and develop their players. But yeah, I'll pull up the schedule one last time for you Fever fans who want to catch them in action. Tuesday, May 28th, Sparks versus Fever, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific on NBA TV and League Pass. Then it's Storm versus Fever on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific on Prime Video. We're very excited to continue watching their team. If you missed last week's episode, the LA Sparks were our team of the week. This week we go Indiana Fever. We'll see who gets to have that hat, I guess, or wear the crown or wear the hat or whatever you want to call it in next week's episode. But I think that's all for us today. You can follow us at Her Hoop Stats on social media. Make sure you subscribe to the Her Hoop Stats podcast network so that you can catch Coast to Coast every week. You can follow myself at Crina MM, follow Cal at CWetzel31, and we will see you next Tuesday.